Hey, everybody, welcome to Making Sense of It All. My guest today is Pat Rumble. Pat, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jesse, and thanks for harassing me enough to get me to do this.
So we've talked about this for a little while now. You actually suggested it to me, talking about kind of youth sports, youth baseball in particular, and kind of the business that it's turned into. I think it's fascinating. When I started diving down the rabbit hole, it's amazing what has happened to youth sports in the last 25, 30 years. And so I figured there'd be nobody I'd rather talk about it with than you.
Yeah, the cool kind of background is, this is a subject close to Jesse and I's heart, and being in it as kids growing up, and then we've talked about it so many times in conversations, and thanks for allowing me the platform to just kind of have a discussion around it and inform your audience on what it is and what it isn't.
100%. Well, and I think you could probably insert, we're talking a lot about baseball, but you could insert soccer here. You could insert basketball here. I think youth sports in general has become an incredibly enormous industry. I mean, all you have to do is type it into a Google search or type it into into an AI engine. And you're talking about an industry that's going to grow to $77.6 billion by 2026. I mean, that is billion with a B. I mean, it has turned into such a gigantic industry in this country, not just recreation.
Yeah, it's crazy if you just walk around and you see what all these kids are wearing of this age. It's a soccer shirt, it's a baseball shirt, it's a football shirt, and it's not of the NFL or NBA players. It's of the travel program or the elite program that they represent. So huge industry, huge upside. Really, really fun to be a part of the journey on both sides of it, and excited to see where it goes.
So before we get rolling, just so the audience knows, talk a little bit about your background with baseball, with sports, and kind of, and we can go into now, but let's just share with them a little bit about where you're coming from with this first.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. So I'm in my early 40s and grew up doing baseball the Little League way, where you went to a Little League organization here in town, Arlington Little League,
Let me
and
stop you here real quick. You don't look a day over 57.
I age like milk. Um, love the fortunate part of being in dermatology. Sorry.
Go for it.
Um,
Sorry about that.
no, so yeah, so did Little League baseball growing up, whereas it was old traditional, which you knew of, like rec league, and then at the end you'd have all stars and did that, and then kind of got introduced, and this is kind of where I met Jesse many many years ago, to what we would call nowadays like a travel elite program, where you took all the some of the best kids in the city from different programs and you put them together, and you would go travel to Gainesville and Tallahassee and different places, and you would show off your skills. And it was really, really cool. So I did that side of it growing up. High school, played at Bishop Kenny for 4 years. Was a really cool experience doing that, pitcher, outfielder. From there, I was lucky enough to get a scholarship at University of Florida and pitched there for 4 years. And what's kind of cool is, I was thinking about where this whole coaching travel baseball thing started for me. It was actually in college.
Okay.
My senior year, I had rotator cuff labrum and capsule surgery, and my what was my career was done. And my college roommates and I, it was really a guy named Jay Honkamp, was like, let's go coach a little league baseball team. And I graduated in 3.5 years somehow from the University of Florida. And what was interesting, I was like, let's do it. I really didn't, I had a lot of time on my hands. So we coached. My very first experience was in college as a senior, coaching a rec baseball team. I think it was like 10 through 12 age group. And we had a blast doing it. We had all these cool systems that we probably way put too much thought into doing it. And what was funny was it kind of enlightened me. The parents freaking loved the way we did it. We were probably fresh blood, different mindset, didn't have any kids on the team. And they asked us to coach the All-Star League for that program. And unfortunately, we couldn't because our lives were moving on as adults. But that was probably where it all started.
Okay. So fast forward to now, you have kids. It's something that, like, and I'm going to throw you on the spot here because I can remember a conversation before children where you said, I will never put my kids into competitive sports so early in their life. Was it?
If you could recall all the naive comments I said back in the day before kids, kids change everything, man. They're just a blessing, and I'm very fortunate. I have two boys. I'm someone, a father that's probably meant for sons. So thank you for that. And thank you for my wife for dealing with all this stuff that we've kind of forced her to do. I have a twin brother and a sister that were highly involved in sports growing up. So this was really like my life.
Right.
But I had a wife that was an only child that this was completely new to her. So travel started for us with my oldest son, Pearson, was around 9, and we just did the normal baseball thing. And then everyone kept hinting at this this next level. And I was like, we'll see about it. And
So
eventually
when
we,
you let me stop you there just because some people are going to be listening that don't know what that, kind of when you're talking about levels of things. When you're talking about that first level of youth sports, you're talking about going to a park and playing recreational league baseball, correct?
exactly, rec ball is what they call it. Great way. A lot of people start off on that young. That's your option usually when you're young. And slowly from there, what they do is they pick off the more talented kids and try to introduce them to this higher level. So we started off at rec. We did it for, I think, a season, maybe.
So recreational baseball too. I mean, you're being run by volunteers, by
Yep.
parents that are going to be out there. There's a minimal cost to it for people to get into. So if they're just dipping their toe into youth sports or if they're just getting a feel for it, there's not a huge amount of cost involved with it. Mostly it's volunteer parents and it's people that are running it at a park that's typically a city park, correct?
Correct. It's from what my experience is 100% volunteer. Minimal cost. You're probably talking $300 a season. That includes uniforms, no travel, limited practices, like couple practices a week, and I think you maybe played 10 or 12 games a season. Great way to get introduced into a sport, just to see what level your kid likes it at a minimal financial commitment and a minimal time commitment.
Okay, so now you're into it. You're knee deep into it. You guys are like, your son is falling in love with it. He wants to do it more. You're interested. So what is that next step?
Well, we we're all in travel. I love it. What I think is kind of cool about it is, as I reflect on it, as a parent, there's um, there's no better way you can teach your kids what the realities of life really are like. And I've had this conversation with both my kids. It resonates more with my 13-year-old than my 9-year-old. But like, how else can I get you experience where you have to perform on a big stage. You have to test your skills. You win or you lose. You assess where you did good or bad. And then you work on whatever that is that you need to work on and you show it next week. And that's what's so cool. I mean, I say sports is life's lessons through baseball. And as a parent and as a father, I think it's great, whether it be baseball or soccer or football. The more you can involve your kids in something like this, you're teaching them lessons that are going to be life lessons that they're not going to be able to learn until later on in life. And it's such good exposure. And the other thing I always think about is we are competing for our kids' time with like video games and different things that are driving their attention. And just to be able to have them involved in this, and selfishly, a passion of my own to be aligned with a passion of my kids is just awesome.
No, I think it's fantastic. It's funny because that's one thing that my wife has brought up as far as something that she sees as a huge benefit to you guys doing so much travel is that you get so much time with your kids doing something that you both love. It's memories that you're creating that'll last a lifetime. I think it's
100%.
fan. I think that whole part of it is fantastic. I think it's great. When you look at youth sports and specifically baseball, because that's what we're talking about. When you look at the industry and you look at what it looked like 25 years ago, and maybe there was some travel. It was just giving rise. I think that we were like I think when we were teenagers, like it was something that was kind of being introduced to this area, and so we started participating in some of it. As you said, that's how you and I met. Um, but now it just seems like it is like you could turn around and you're going to see something at a park or somewhere around like if they're interested in sports, there's going to be something about, hey, you can go join this travel league if you're good enough and you can go, play baseball year round, play soccer year round. Like tell me a little bit about what you've seen in that change, that shift.
Yeah, and kind of before I do it, I need to probably give an appropriate plug to the guys that did it for us in our generation. So our exposure was done by parents,
Yes,
fully
100%.
volunteer. So I personally never got into this for the money. I've never collected money or anything like that. I've done it as a way of paying back to the Gene Ritchies, the that would sit there and throw batting practice to us when we're little mini me's.
100%. Shout out to
Our,
Sergio Padron as well. I know you didn't play on his team, but that's how I
yeah.
met Gene Ritchie as well. So,
I mean, people don't realize like how much time and effort those people put into it in our generation before this business side of it started now. So that's kind of grounded me in the thoughts that like I owe it to the next generation to kind of provide the same level of service, kind of being uniquely exposed and skilled in these areas to give back to them. So what's kind of cool is like people are like travel baseball. I think a lot of times they kind of miscategorize it on what it is. I've had a lot of conversations with parents, and I say, you know what it is? It's a response to a marketplace that you guys have all asked for. What's interesting is as you go through these different levels, one of the biggest complaints you'll hear from the parents is you'll hear this term daddy ball, where a dad gets involved and they make all their concessions to their kid. Their kid plays shortstop, their kid bats third, their kid always pitches. And the parents kind of always grumble about that a little bit. And I'm like, well, you got to really realize what you have here. You have a 100% volunteer putting in way more time doing something that they don't do professionally. That's what you get. I mean, there's got to be some level of perks to that. I think you're misguided if you don't understand that. But in response to that, which is beautiful about this travel baseball thing, is it is a marketplace. Like it's a free marketplace. People said, well, wait a second, you parents don't like that? What if we brought in non-parents to coach your organizations, people with a background in like high school coaching, collegiate baseball, professional baseball? And what we did was we paid them to coach your kids. And what that does is that allows there to be no um, internal influence on who plays and who doesn't. And you would be shocked to how many people have bought into that. So where we're at now in travel baseball, in my opinion, has just been a response to the marketplace on what these parents really want. And they're able to give their kids this experience with these high level coaches, with these high level programs, with people that really know what they're doing. But you got to pay them to come out and do this because they're not associated with the team at all. But what's really cool is as we do this, I've been giving it some thought. Like, if you're a parent and you have a kid that wants to do soccer, football, whatever, here for the baseball side of it, I call St. Johns County the SEC of baseball. There is so much talent sitting here in 32259. It is crazy. And to make this a little bit bigger, Jacksonville as a whole. Um, like everyone's trying to move to these areas because of school districts. So we just get more kids per household and the baseball is incredible. Same as any sport here. Here's my kind of thing for your parents. There's a lot of options depending on what level of commitment you want for your kid. And what I think is the more options for the parents, the better. Now, probably what we'll get into a little bit is what do those options look like and which one's the best fit is for you to kind of understand as a parent.
sure. Well, I mean, why don't we go there? I mean, you kind of segued perfectly into it. So,
So
tell
I kind
tell
of
it.
break it up as like we'll start at the not the lowest level, but the least level of commitment is your rec level sports. Like you kind of mentioned it, Jesse. There's great rec level programs here around town where essentially it's a bare minimum cost. You're probably talking $300, give or take. You're going to have your daddy coaches. That's the only way you're going to get people out there. It's 100% volunteer. So keep that in mind as you're uh, forming your complaints. Um, but it's a really good way to break into anything sports related and just see how your kids like it. Once you separate that and you go to the next level is where it gets really, really committed. So I'll kind of say your next tier is where you have parents that really know what they're doing and they don't want to play the rec side of it. And I'll kind of talk to you about why. The problem is you pull these elite players and you put them in the rec system, and there's a lot of injury risk. There's just missed levels of competition, and what parents want is to get rid of that. So the next level is probably where a very experienced dad will form a lower level cost program because they're still volunteering, but they're getting into these these level tournaments that are much, much higher. From there, you can go to the extreme other side where it is completely professionally run organizations. You're talking about bringing, two or three high level coaches, paying them to run the programs. They're bringing in the good equipment, they're bringing in their experience, they're bringing in the pitching machines, they're bringing everything that costs a lot of money. It's a lot more expensive. That level of commitment's at least probably 2 to 3 practices a week, and you're probably talking 10 tournaments at least a season, which is usually about 4 or 5 months. And most tournaments are travel based. So you're talking about hotel expenses and food expenses, but great level of competition.
Okay. So, as you're saying this, it was interesting. There was probably 20 years ago, maybe close to it now. Um, I remember hearing Evan Longoria when he was playing for
Mm.
the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. He was on the radio and he was just railing against the monetization of youth sports and how it was just so upsetting to him how you see all of these people taking control of youth sports and monetizing it, turning it into a business. As I'm hearing you talk about this, I hear you kind of laying it out as options. But he was kind of saying, hey, they're taking over the sport and they're ruining park ball because they're taking away all of the good, like they're essentially taking people and they're saying, well, you have to do it at this level if you want to play the sport. All of that being said, and there's a lot more than just one question with this, but do you see where, like, because you talk about when you put monetary levels to things, you start eliminating people because of their financial ability to pay or their parents'
Yeah.
financial ability to pay. So, do you see this as something that is becoming a barrier to entry to getting into sports at a young age for kids who maybe not who couldn't necessarily afford it? And so do they go a different direction? Does it take them out of the sport? Or do the kids who are playing travel ball just get introduced to these other kids who may be talented at a later date where, like, oh my God, all of a sudden you see this influx of talent into, say, high school baseball or middle school baseball or some of these programs that don't necessarily cost money to play?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And it's probably a little bit of both, honestly. The word that comes to my mind is natural selection, a little bit of sports, where the best survive. And it's interesting because we talk about this as a business podcast, and kind of like businesses, if you don't evolve to a marketplace, you go out of business. And what's kind of happening a little bit in sports is there's becoming a little bit more of a business approach in it where these the rec programs are always going to be there because they're available for the cost side of it. But the elite programs are moving over because, I mean, the parents are so committed to getting their kids anything and everything that there's such a market for it. I would say there might be a little bit of cutting out of not allowing everyone to get in because of the expense. It's definitely something like I used to joke when I did it, but it wasn't a joke to the parents. I said, when you commit to a travel season, you need to grab your hobbies, you need to grab your extra money, you need to grab your Jaguar tickets, you need to grab everything, and you just need to shove them in the middle, your vacation time, because it is a full level commitment to do it at this level. But I will say what if a program does it right, it's all about setting expectations. So I think if a program comes out and says, Mr. and Mrs. Parent, this is what we expect, this is what our season's costs are going to be, this is what our season's commitments are going to be, this is when we're going to practice, where we're going to practice, this is where our tournaments are expected to be, these are the ones that are expected to be travel tournaments. I think that's a really fair way of doing it because then a parent can take that information back to their household and they can make an informed decision on what's best for their kid. Now, I will say for those that can't quite or don't want to do the big financial commitment, and don't get me wrong, it is a big financial commitment. Um, you can be smarter about it. You can stick local. There's a lot of different programs. Even the rec-based organizations here in town have phenomenal options. Anything that's Cal Ripken based, you're still talking about $300 a season with non-paid coaches plus the overnight travel. So you're probably talking $1,500 a season, and they can compete with almost anybody because they're pulling all these great kids out of Julington Creek. So I don't I see both sides of it in the
Sure.
sense, but I just love the fact that if you want it, it's there. If
100%.
you don't want it and you want something else, that's there as well. And if you want the little league format where you can go to national TV and do that, hey, those programs are here too for low cost.
So let's get to that side of things, just because I think that there's going to be people that were very interested in us talking about what's available, but then there's also that, the side of my audience that's interested in what does this look like as a business now? You brought up, as a joke kind of, as far as, throw away your NFL tickets. But the reality of it is that in the United States alone right now, youth sports as a whole is approaching $15 billion in annualized income. That's rivaling the NFL. So you've got people who are committed to going and watching professional sports, and you've got people who have become extremely committed to their children and watching their children kind of go rise through the ranks, no matter what sport it is. That being said, what I see is a tremendous opportunity that didn't exist 25 years ago for people who want to stay in their chosen sport as a profession. So it used to be, especially, we'll take baseball because that's what we're talking about. When I was going up through it, wherever you aged out of it, even if you aged out as a professional, even if you were even if you made it to the minor league baseball or college baseball, wherever it was, unless you wanted to try to compete for a coaching job and stay in high school, or a coaching job and stay in a collegiate system, or if you were lucky enough to be looked at as a professional coach, but still those jobs were few and far between, and there wasn't a whole lot of money associated with it unless you became a very big name in your sport. You could make some money with some camps or different things like that, but there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity to say, I want to stay in baseball as a career, and here's how I want to do it. On the playing side, staying on the field, there's administrative jobs and things around professional sporting um, organizations as
Organizations,
well.
yeah.
So all of that being said, though, now you have a $15 billion industry that baseball has a large part of, that has jobs and that has ways of earning an income associated with it that didn't exist the way they do today 25 years ago. I think that's, in a lot of ways, I
Well,
think
I
that's
think it's
tremendous. It's a job creator.
it's a very well said, very well point that people don't give a lot of thoughts to. And I used to tell people this sometimes when I was going through this, and sometimes your best coaches aren't coaches because people don't realize like and I don't know all the dollars and cents of it, but coaching baseball is a passion thing. It's not, most people don't do it for a profession because the profession isn't there yet to support your kids and everything, or you're just putting so many hours in the evening that it's really hard to raise a family. What's really cool about the point you just made is I think the evolution of all these sports allows people that have a passion to do this and are really freaking good at it. And there's a lot of people out there to make a career out of it.
Right.
Like people don't realize like your high school coaches, they're not making much money doing that. That's a passion of
It's
theirs.
just stipend on top of whatever they're making
Minimal,
in their regular
minimal.
day job.
And they are working a lot and they're traveling a lot. So it's almost like the financial side's a barrier of entry to being a coach. Like, you and I have talked in the past. We both had a background that we could have gone into that. And honestly, I'm kind of glad I did it because you don't know what you don't know, but it's a lot of like volunteer hours. It's a lot of, minimal making money off baseball coach camps. And that's at the highest level in the collegiate side of it. It's traveling and it's moving your family in different places. So I think you're bringing up a good point here with what this allows people to do. If there's people that are really passionate about this and are really good at it, they can implant themselves in a travel program and get compensated for their services. And I always tell people, what I love about business is if I'm hiring you or you're hiring me and I know what it costs and I know what you're going to do and we shake hands, I call that a win-win. And that's a lot of what this is. Like I always tell people, don't get caught up so much in the cost, even though Jesse knows me very well. I'm extremely cost sensitive. Get caught up in the make sure I know what I'm getting for my money, make sure it's a commitment that matches my family and that will prosper my kid. And it is awesome to have some extremely high level talent. Like even in Jacksonville, you got a lot of these high school coaches that are coaching in these high level travel organizations because we compensate them accordingly. And that way they can get to the youth. I mean, they can get to these kids at a younger age and give them the level of development that they need. Like even my counter to what Evan's quote was imagine if you have unique talent to be able to get partnered with really good coaches that know what they can do. you can take that unique talent and inspire them to be something very, very special right out of here in Jacksonville, Florida. If you didn't have those resources, that kid might not get exposed to what he needs to get exposed to. It might fall off and not be able to meet his potential. So I think both sides of that original question are very true.
Well, and I think there's another part of this that I haven't even brought up, and that's social media. I
Oh
think
yeah.
social media, coupled with all of these opportunities, and when you start to put some production value around it as well, I think you're giving kids a platform to be seen by millions when they used to only be seen by hundreds, or maybe if they built a reputation, then people would come see them or come, they'd be exposed to more coaches, more opportunities, but the exposure that people can create for themselves and for their kids in today's environment is unbelievably exponentially bigger than what it used to be. And you're not reliant upon getting lucky at any level. If you have talent, or if you want people to see you, you can
Yeah.
self promote in today's world.
You're bringing up a good point. When you and I were playing, scouts would have to come to games. They would have to they'd have to know who you are. If you're a small kid in a small town, you might not get that exposure. And I think there's an interesting switch going on in all of sports right now. And we'll have to see how this finishes up. I think the player is the product now. With all this NIL stuff and everything that's going on, like you are your own product and you're going to have an ability to make incredible money not even making it to the quote unquote professional realm of it. You could probably spend multiple podcasts on the discussion of what the NILs do into these high level athletes, but it's kind of interesting. Before when you and I played college baseball, you got a scholarship. You might have been worth a lot more than a scholarship.
Right.
And that's what you get. And in baseball, it's 11.2 or 11.7. So guess what? You didn't get the whole pie, you got part of the pie. So I hope you're
Sure.
smart and I hope you got Florida bright futures. Nowadays, these kids can make 100,000, sometimes on the football sides, multiple millions of dollars just on their name. So that social media aspect, like if you have a super talented young kid, I think you need to give some thought to that market, these 9, 8, 7 year olds. I know that sounds super young, but it'll probably happen sooner than that. It's a lot going to be about how many followers do you have in a weird way? Like, what is your social footprint like? And that might drive more of the financial side of it than a scholarship. I used to make the argument, you offer a scholarship, how do you know the other party wants that scholarship? They might
100%.
not.
Well,
So,
I mean, I'll give an example. There's a gentleman that we grew up with, that his name is Jeff Kendall. Shout out to Jeff if he's listening to this. But I have watched his oldest son grow up on social media. He was one of the first people that I noticed that did an excellent job promoting his son and his other kids, by the way, too. But his whole journey, I've been able to follow it through Facebook and
yeah.
watch what this kid has done. And this kid is incredibly talented, and he's going to be playing at Florida next year, it sounds like. And it's like, but I've seen him grow up.
Go
Like,
Gators.
I've seen him grow up from being a kid playing youth sports and travel baseball to being and he doesn't. This is the point where I was getting with this. It sounded like he even went a different route than going into high school, because they've got these academies set up now, even
Oh, yeah.
where they've got them set up to where these kids can focus on their chosen sport, because it is a business. There's a tremendous value to do this. And it is so much so that they're like, hey, go focus on baseball and make academics, either equal or even a little bit secondary to what you're doing on the baseball field. Which, in my mind, I'm always like, hey, go get an education, because 99% of you are going to wash out of the sport, and you're going to need to fall back on that education. But it is pretty interesting where, people are seeing that monetary value in sports and investing a lot up front in these kids and in these young men, young women that are growing up through it.
Yeah, and what's really cool is I'm seeing a little bit more of the hybrid side of it. And assuming you can do this as a parent, I think this is a great approach. I'm seeing a lot of stay home kids now
Hmm.
where they are being taught in the different environments where they're not physically going to a school, and they will do their education from, I'm making up numbers, 8 to 11. Then they'll run for their lunch break. They'll go do their athletics at like a D-bats or working out at a gym or something like that. They'll come back and they'll do a little bit more and finishing up their academic side of it. And they're being super efficient. I think, and we might be able to get into this a little bit too. I think efficiencies in sports is huge. Especially baseball. Baseball can be a very slow sport, but very rep heavy in the need of it. And a lot of times you go to these practices, and what I used to tell the parents is team practices are for team development. Individual time is for individual development. You just can't get the time needed to execute what these kids really need. Like I remember having a conversation with a parent one time. I'm like, you can just do the math. A practice on your basic slot is what, an hour and 30 minutes. Let's just say for argument's sake, you're going to cut off 10, 15 minutes for stretching, throwing. For math sakes, you're at 120 minutes with 12 kids. That divides up into 10 minutes per kid. And this
Right.
is kind of going back a little bit about these organizations. This is one thing my kind of watch out to some parents, or maybe just one of my learnings in going through this is you're going to hear a lot about you need to join this program because we focus on the development of the kid. My experience is there's very few programs that do that really well.
Yeah, you
That's a
can't do that. When you have
You
twenty
can't.
20 kids or 15 kids, however many kids are out there, you cannot focus on one kid at a time. It's just not possible.
I just think it's a false expectation. I think it's I don't want to say sales pitch, but they intend on doing that. But as a
Hey,
parent, sometimes you just think, oh, okay, I'm going to pay all this money to this organization, and then my kid's going to get developed. And then what happens is the expectations are wrong. So you go through the season, and then a parent's complaining because they're like, my kid's not getting the developmental time. And the reality is, it was never there. If I was going to set fair
right.
expectations, which I used to always try to do for parents, is like, we're going to work on the team stuff, the individual stuff to do it at a high level is going to have to be done on an individual basis. And that way we're under fair expectations of what this is going to look like going on. So that's just one watch out that I have for parents. You're going to hear a lot about we're the best at development, development, development. I just think that's a hard bar to hit.
It's just like any business, I think. If you look at things, if I was hiring somebody to come in my home and do work in my home, I'm going to get estimates, I'm going to look at it, I'm going to read reviews, I'm going to get, feedback from people that I know and hopefully get a referral. So it's like if you treat youth sports the same way because it is a business at this point in time. So if you look at it and you make the best selection up front that you possibly can based on references and based on actually doing your homework as a parent, then you have a better chance to put your kid or as you said, they're the product at this point. Like with a lot of this, I mean, that's what you're looking at is what do you want your finished product to look like here? So, I think the difference with it is there's a talent component to it to where, you can only, people are going to go so far with what they have. And like, but
Yeah.
that's a different podcast for a different time and a different set of people to talk about it. But
But it's interesting. I was talking with this, gosh, a couple days ago with a parent who had a son that is at the college level.
mhm,
And I think one thing to kind of ask yourself as a parent when you go through any of these sports is like, what is the end goal?
sure.
Like, let's reverse engineer this. Like, what is the goal? And I would say for my kids, it's to, from an athletic standpoint, it's to get them to high school. And people are like, you don't want to give them further? And I said, no, I think that's them getting them further. I want to give them the opportunities to support them financially, support them emotionally, and do the things needed to get them to high school. Where they go from there, if they go any further, is completely on them. But I want to throw a
Sure.
watch out there for parents too. One thing that I've learned in doing this is this is going to end. Like just you and I had, what you consider successful baseball careers, and here we are doing something completely different. I mean, I was thinking about it. Baseball was our life for how many years? Like 15 years or something like that.
Oh, at least, yes.
But we've had professional careers longer. And
100%.
this is probably my watch out for parents specifically. And I think this one more applies to dads. Use this sport to build a really solid relationship with your kids. If you realize they're going to be doing something else in life, build trust with them, build compassion with them, like be a part of this journey with them, knowing that there will be a time in life that they need you more than some stupid tournament on the weekend or some stupid showcase or some stupid tryout. I think where parents miss it is I see parents writing their kids so bad during this process that I'm like, you are going to not only lose your kid from the sport, which is the smallest of my concerns on what I see, you're going to lose your relationship with your kid over a sport which was not even going to be their life. And that's just a big, big mistake. And I'm sure, like, as you and I sit here and say this, some of our best memories with our parents were probably throwing balls at each other. Like,
100%.
I mean, and use this to build really good relationships. Like here we are doing a podcast. If you would have told ourselves 15 years ago that you and I would be doing a podcast, we'd probably be like, a what cast?
What's a
Like
podcast?
what we used to do, just for the audience, is Jesse and I played baseball together at Bishop Kenny and really good friends ever since. And we used to go into the cage and throw live at bats to each other for hours. Probably part of the reason why I had Tommy John was trying to get you out. Maybe one slipped every once in a while and got him. I don't know. But like this sport has built me lifelong friendships. It has built, it is even the travel side, it has allowed me to run into really good families that I would have never met that we consider really, really, really good friends. And I think when all this is over for myself, but also as parents have gone through this, I think we would have looked at the upside of all that and been like, man, this was such a cool experience. Like, yeah, winning the tournaments is great. Trust me, the $5 rings are not worth it. I was actually throwing batting
Don't say that
practice.
too loud. Those kids will be disappointed.
Yeah. You know what's funny is I was throwing batting practice to my boys the other day, and you know what balls they were hitting? Pat Rumble home run balls.
That's funny.
They were in a bucket, and I was like, "Hey, look, nine something something, grand slam. Do something good with this." And I tell them one day, all these home run balls that they're collecting and game balls they're collecting. My hope is that happens to this is you're throwing them to your grandkids one day. We hold on to them because they represent memories, but if you can pass that along to this next generation, you can take your home run balls and have them pound them into the ground on a cement batting cage and scratch them all up. That's a win.
I think that's fantastic. I don't think we could end this any better. I think we scratched the surface on so many different little things today. And I'd love to do some additional, focuses on things like DBATs or those businesses that have kind of come off of youth sports and really have become an industry unto themselves as far as kind of servicing that youth sport market. Talking about the different leagues how they've been set up. And, you brought up Little League or Cal Ripken and kind of what that means. I mean, I think there's a lot to this. I think that like I said, we just scratched the surface and we went in a lot of different directions, but it creates some interest and it creates some curiosity into, what are these things? So,
Yeah,
I
just
would,
for a little teaser, I could talk about this for hours. Jesse and I, we
sure.
do talk about this for hours. If we just press record one day, we'd probably make some great podcasts. But DBATS is a phenomenal organization that is one of the three in town. Is owned by Sheik Mathis, who's a former Jacksonville Jaguar here, local guy that just invested a ton back in baseball and has done it for the right reasons. He's been a volunteer coach at Jack's Beach with his sons, 100% non-paid for years, giving back to the community. That place has a great organization. One thing we've kind of ventured into is sprinting classes with Coach Greg. There's a lot of real good professionals around here. They're very talented in their skill set, and they offer those programs. My advice on all that to parents is think about your own skill set. And think about what you can do and you can't do. And what I mean by that is I feel like on the baseball side of it, I could take the development of my kids and probably run with it with just the
Sure.
resources and experience that I have. But I can't teach you sprinting.
Neither
And
could I.
yeah, and there's some great individuals out there that can. If there's great organizations out there that do phenomenal things with appropriate sports related physical exercise. If there's something that you don't or can't do, outsource it, assuming
Yep.
you can.
It's
And
that
there's some
old
great
it's that
stuff
old
there.
who not how principle. Like
Yep.
rather than trying to figure out how to teach it to your kids, look for somebody who can do it better.
Great
Saves
people out
everybody
doing it.
time.
Yep.
100%. Pat, thank you very much for joining me. Like I said, more to come. I'd love to do more with you if you have the time, and we'll talk soon.
And what's that, Jesse? You said, what was that last bit of advice I'd have for parents? Here's what I would say. Well, and on a high note, funny note. If I had to do all over again, I think your parents should go out and buy a Coach shirt that says Coach on the back. You need to buy a baseball hat, some sunglasses, a fungo, and a backpack. And just walk through every organization's front gate and just say, I'm a coach. And you'll save yourself a lot in entry fees. Obviously, it's a joke, but I look back at it and I was like, man, just by wearing a Coach shirt saves me about $10 a day getting into these organizations. So, hey, man, I really appreciate you staying on me about doing this and bringing light to the travel baseball side of it. I think this is going to be very informative for the parents out there. And thank you for everything you do, man.
Like I said, we just scratched the surface. Hopefully, more to come. We'll talk soon.
See you, bud.